What if the reason you keep losing discipline is not laziness, but the fact that your brain has been quietly trained to hate it? And worse, what if every time you force yourself to be disciplined, you are actually reinforcing the exact neural resistance that makes you quit later? There is a psychological trick happening inside your mind right now, one that determines whether you become someone who controls their impulses or someone who is controlled by them. And most people never even notice it happening, because discipline is not what you think it is, and your brain does not naturally want it. Your brain is not designed for discipline. It is designed for survival, for comfort, for efficiency. It constantly scans for the fastest path to reward and the lowest path to discomfort. That means every time you try to be disciplined, you are not just fighting habits, you are fighting biology. But here is where it gets interesting. There are people who don't force discipline at all. They don't wrestle with it. They don't negotiate with it. They don't hype themselves up with motivation videos or guilt. They simply enjoy it. Not because they are special, not because they are stronger, but because they have unknowingly hacked a psychological loop in the brain that changes how discipline feels at a chemical level. And once you understand it, you will never look at self-control the same way again. Because discipline is not something you practice. It is something your brain learns to associate with identity and reward. And most people get this completely backwards. The hidden truth is this: your brain does not repeat what is good for you. It repeats what feels good in the moment, or what it has been trained to interpret as rewarding. This is why someone can know exactly what they should do and still not do it. It is not ignorance. It is conditioning. Every habit you have right now is not just a behavior. It is a psychological shortcut your brain has decided is safe. Even the destructive ones, especially the destructive ones. Scrolling endlessly on your phone, delaying important work, avoiding discomfort, eating when you are not hungry. These are not random choices. They are reinforced escape routes. And discipline feels like the opposite of escape. It feels like restriction, delay, pressure. So your brain resists it automatically. But here is the twist most people never realize. The brain can be reprogrammed to associate discipline with reward instead of punishment. And the moment that switch happens, everything changes. Now you are not forcing yourself anymore. You are pulling yourself forward. So why does almost nobody notice this? Because the world teaches discipline in the worst possible way. It teaches it as punishment. Wake up early, suffer, grind, push through pain. No excuses, no breaks, no pleasure. So your brain immediately builds one association. Discipline 等于 discomfort, and the brain avoids discomfort the same way it avoids danger. That is why most people fail, not because they are weak, but because they are trained to see discipline as something painful. Let's go deeper. Think about a student preparing for an exam. The moment they open their book, their brain whispers, "This is boring, this is hard, check your phone instead." Or someone trying to work out for the first time. The body feels resistance, and the mind immediately searches for escape. Or someone trying to build a business. The moment uncertainty appears, procrastination kicks in like a defense mechanism. But something strange happens with certain individuals. They still feel resistance, but they don't obey it. Not because they are immune, but because they have changed what happens after resistance appears. And that is where the real psychological shift lives. Let's talk about what is actually happening inside your brain. Your mind runs on a basic loop. Quay, behavior, reward. This loop is responsible for every habit you have. The cue triggers the behavior. The behavior leads to a reward. The brain remembers the reward and repeats the loop. Now here's the secret. Most people break discipline because they remove the reward from disciplined behavior. So the loop never stabilizes. But high discipline individuals unconsciously do something different. They attach immediate psychological reward to discipline itself, not future reward. Immediate reward. This is crucial, because your brain does not truly respond to long-term goals. It responds to immediate emotional feedback. So when someone says, "I will work hard now so I can succeed later," the brain hears, "Suffering now, maybe reward later." That is not compelling enough. But when discipline itself becomes rewarding even slightly, the brain starts to crave it. This is where identity comes in. If you repeatedly tell yourself, "I am someone who follows through," your brain begins to reduce internal conflict. Every time you act in alignment with that identity, you trigger a small internal reward signal. Consistency, stability, self-recognition, and slowly, discipline stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like confirmation of who you are. But most people never reach this stage because they never stay long enough in the discomfort phase for the rewiring to happen. Instead, they quit right before the brain adapts, and that is the silent trap. Now let's look at real-life examples. Imagine two people trying to build the same habit, waking up at 5 a.m. The first person relies on motivation. The alarm rings. They feel tired. They argue with themselves. Just 5 more minutes. Eventually they give in. the second person feels the same resistance. But instead of negotiating, they use a different internal script. This discomfort is normal. This is the moment my identity is being trained. They still feel the resistance. But now, the meaning has changed. And meaning changes behavior faster than motivation ever will. After a few days, something subtle begins to shift. The second person's brain stops seeing the alarm as a threat. It starts seeing it as a signal of identity activation. Not comfort, but alignment. This is how psychological conditioning works. Now, let's go deeper into why most people never notice this mechanism. Because the brain hides it behind emotional noise. Procrastination feels like laziness, but it is actually emotional prediction. Your brain is predicting discomfort and trying to avoid it before it happens. Resistance feels like weakness, but it is actually habit, conflict hold, identity versus new identity. Lack of discipline feels personal, but it is often purely neurological reinforcement patterns built over years. Once you understand this, guilt becomes useless, because guilt does not rewire behavior. It only increases emotional pressure, which the brain eventually escapes from. This is why disciplined people are not necessarily more motivated. They are just less emotionally entangled in resistance. Now let's talk about how this affects everyday life in a more subtle way. Every time you choose short-term comfort over long-term alignment, your brain strengthens a pathway. And every time you choose alignment even slightly, you weaken the opposing pathway. But here's the part most people miss. The brain does not care about magnitude. It cares about repetition. Small, disciplined actions repeated consistently rewire behavior faster than intense bursts of effort, followed by collapse. That is why someone who studies for 30 minutes daily outperforms someone who studies for 10 hours once and disappears for a week. Neural pathways are built through consistency, not intensity. Now there is another layer deeper. Your environment is constantly training your discipline without your awareness. Every notification, every distraction, every easy escape route is shaping your brain's expectation of stimulation. So if your environment is high distraction, your brain adapts to low friction, pleasure seeking. In that environment, discipline feels unnatural, not because you lack willpower, but because your brain has been trained into instant reward dependency. And this is where things become dangerous. Because once your brain adapts to constant stimulation, silence feels uncomfortable, focus feels heavy, effort feels painful. And at that stage, discipline is not just hard, it feels like withdrawal. But there is also a warning here that most people ignore. If you try to force discipline without changing the reward structure, your brain will eventually rebel. It will sabotage you through fatigue, avoidance, emotional burnout, or sudden loss of motivation. Not because you are failing, but because your brain is restoring equilibrium. So how do you protect yourself from this internal sabotage? You stop treating discipline as a war, and you start treating it as conditioning. You do not force behavior. You design reward loops. You make discipline immediately satisfying in small ways. Completion triggers satisfaction. Progress triggers acknowledgement. Consistency triggers identity reinforcement. Even something as simple as tracking streaks can create a psychological reward loop that makes your brain crave continuity. But there is a deeper ethical layer here, because this knowledge can be used in two directions. You can use it to manipulate yourself into growth, or you can use it to manipulate others into compliance. The same psychological principles that build discipline can also build control systems in groups, workplaces, and relationships. That is why understanding this mechanism comes with responsibility, because once you see how behavior is shaped, you stop believing in the illusion of pure willpower. Everything becomes structure, reinforcement, and identity conditioning. Now let's bring it to the final insight. Most people think discipline is the ability to do hard things. But psychologically, discipline is something far more subtle. It is the point where resistance no longer feels like an enemy, but like a signal you are about to grow. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be disciplined and instead start training your brain to enjoy alignment, discipline stops being a struggle at all. It becomes automatic, not because life gets easier, but because your interpretation of difficulty changes. And once that shift happens, you begin to notice something strange. The same tasks that used to drain you no longer carry emotional weight, not because they became easier, but because your brain stopped negotiating with them. And that is the real trick, not forcing discipline, but teaching your brain that discipline is simply the shortest path to internal stability. And when the brain accepts that, you are no longer fighting yourself. You are simply following the path your mind now believes is inevitable. Something is going to happen in your mind in the next few seconds. You are going to either agree with what you hear or quietly resist it. And that resistance is not random. It is your brain detecting danger in information that could change how you operate. Because discipline is not just a habit problem, it is a control system problem. And most people have been trying to fix it with the wrong tools their entire life. They try motivation, they try routines, they try punishment, They try inspiration, but none of that touches the real mechanism running underneath their behavior. Because discipline is not stored in your effort, it is stored in your brain's prediction of what happens after effort. That prediction is what decides everything. Not your goals, not your dreams, not your intentions, your predictions. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Your brain is not trying to make you successful. It is trying to make you consistent with your past, even if your past version is destroying your future. That is why change feels like resistance. Not because the task is hard, but because the identity performing the task is unfamiliar. Now, listen closely. Every time you attempt discipline, your brain runs a silent scan. Is this who we are now? Or is this a temporary mistake? If the action is new, the brain hesitates. If the action is repeated, the brain relaxes. If the action is interrupted, the brain resets. That is why consistency is more powerful than intensity. Intensity shocks the system. Consistency rewires it. But here is the part most people never realize. The brain does not reward success. It rewards predictability. So when you try to become disciplined in bursts, one good day, then 2 bad days, then another attempt, you are not building discipline. You are building confusion in your neural prediction system, and confusion leads to resistance. Now, let's go deeper. There is a hidden psychological loop that controls nearly all human behavior. Anticipation, resistance, escape, relief. This is the loop behind procrastination. You anticipate discomfort. You feel resistance. You escape into distraction. Then you feel relief. And your brain learns one powerful lesson. Escape equals safety. So the next time discipline appears, your brain does not evaluate it logically. It immediately triggers escape behavior. Not because you are weak, but because your nervous system has been trained. Now here is where everything shifts. Discipline is not the removal of that loop. It is the interruption of the loop at the resistance stage. That is where identity is rewritten, not before. There is a hidden psychological loop that controls nearly all human behavior. Anticipation, resistance, escape, relief. This is the loop behind procrastination. You anticipate discomfort. You feel resistance. You escape into distraction. Then you feel relief. And your brain learns one powerful lesson. Escape equals safety. So the next time discipline appears, your brain does not evaluate it logically. It immediately triggers escape behavior. Not because you are weak, but because your nervous system has been trained. Now here is where everything shifts. Discipline is not the removal of that loop. It is the interruption of the loop at the resistance stage. That is where identity is rewritten. Not before, not after, during. When resistance appears, and you do not escape, that is the moment your brain is forced to update its prediction. And that update is what we call discipline. But there is a deeper layer still. Your brain assigns emotional meaning to repetition. So if you repeatedly avoid something, the emotional weight of that task increases over time. It becomes heavier in your mind than it actually is in reality. But if you repeatedly face it without dramatic emotional reaction, the brain starts to downgrade its importance. It becomes neutral. And neutrality is the birthplace of automatic discipline. Not motivation, not force. Neutrality. Now think about your daily life. There are things you avoid, not because they are difficult, but because your brain has inflated their emotional cost over time. A simple task becomes mentally heavy. A small responsibility becomes an emotional burden. Not because of the task, but because of accumulated avoidance. And the longer you avoid it, the more powerful it becomes in your mind. That is psychological inflation. And it silently controls most people. Now, here is the reversal. Every time you complete a task you normally avoid, without emotional drama, you are not just getting things done. You are deflating its emotional weight in your brain. You are telling your nervous system, this is not a threat. And slowly, the task loses its emotional charge. Until one day, it no longer triggers resistance at all. That is when discipline stops feeling like effort. But most people never reach that stage because they misunderstand discomfort. They think discomfort means stop, when in reality, discomfort often means your brain is updating. Now let's go even deeper. There is a point in every behavior change where something very subtle happens. The internal argument stops. You no longer debate whether to do the task. You simply begin. That is not personality. That is neurological automation. Your brain has stopped allocating decision energy to that behavior. And that only happens after enough consistent repetition without interruption. But here is the trap. One long break can partially reset the system, not completely, but enough to bring resistance back. That is why discipline feels fragile at the beginning and stable later. Because early discipline is still under negotiation. Later discipline is automated agreement. Now, before we go further, if you are still here, it means something in this is hitting a part of you that recognizes the pattern, not just understands it, but recognizes it. And that is important, because recognition is the first stage of control. So let's go deeper into the final mechanism. There is a psychological shift that separates people who struggle with discipline from people who eventually stop thinking about it entirely. It is the shift from emotional participation to behavioral execution. Most people are emotionally involved in every decision. They feel the resistance, they feel the debate, they feel the weight. But disciplined individuals eventually detach emotionally from the decision process. They do not negotiate with the feeling, they execute despite it. Not because they are stronger, but because the emotional system no longer leads the decision system. Now here is the part that will reframe everything. Discipline is not about doing hard things. It is the shift from emotional participation to behavioral execution. Most people are emotionally involved in every decision. They feel the resistance, they feel the debate, they feel the weight. But disciplined individuals eventually detach emotionally from the decision process. They do not negotiate with the feeling, they execute despite it. Not because they are stronger, but because the emotional system no longer leads the decision system. Now here is the part that will reframe everything. Discipline is not about doing hard things. It is about removing emotional authority from impulse and giving authority to repetition. Now, if you've made it this far, you are already inside the small group of people who have seen the structure behind behavior instead of just the surface of motivation. And that changes how you are going to see yourself after this moment. Because you now understand something most people never articulate clearly. You are not fighting laziness. You are fighting trained prediction systems. And prediction systems only change through evidence, not intention. So here is your challenge. For the next 24 hours, choose one thing you normally avoid. Not something big, something simple enough that your brain will still try to resist it. And when resistance appears, do not analyze it, do not negotiate with it. Do not wait for the feeling to change. Just begin for 10 minutes, not for success, but for evidence. Then come back and comment one word. Execute it. Because that word will not just represent action. It will represent a moment your brain started learning, a new authority structure. And if you couldn't do it, comment resisted. No excuses, no judgment, just truth. Because your brain is always keeping score. The only question is, what version of you is currently winning that score?